my personal request for you to read my favorite books. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is For Pause and a Book. I make bookish videos over here on my little corner of the internet, so if that's something you're interested in, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below. Today I am going to be rereading the 5 books that I am putting on my host favorites list for Amazing Readathon. If you have no idea what the Amazing Readathon is, I will link the announcement video up above. Today I am going to be reading the 5 books that I'm going to be putting on my host favorites list. Quick summary, the Amazing Readathon has 5 different teams that are 5 different genres, so I'm going to be picking one book for each genre, so that way everybody kind of has equal opportunity, and you will receive extra points and extra readathon currency if you read a host favorite during the month. So this is my appeal to you. So maybe you'll want to read these books. Let's talk about the books that I'm going to be reading, and then this will be a vlog, so you'll get to see me react to them. Some of these I have not read for several years. All of these are by queer authors, which will also get you extra bonus points for the readathon. So for Team Fantasy, we have The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. This is a library in hell where all unwritten stories go to die. So if an author has an idea for a story, starts writing a story, but then never publishes it, it ends up going to this library in hell. And our main character is a librarian in this hell, or in this library. And one of the characters escapes and makes it back to Earth. So that's going to be fun. Then we have Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is going to be for Team Spooky, and this is about killer mermaids, essentially, and a diving team that is trying to find the shipwreck and what happened to that ship, and they encounter killer mermaids. For Team General Fiction, I have Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This book takes place in the 1950s, and it is about a girl who finds out she's not really straight. She kind of likes her best friend, and obviously when you're an immigrant in the 1950s in San Francisco, that's not something you want to publicly talk about. So this is going to be her journey through that. For Team Romance, we have Work For It by Talia Hibbert. Talia is one of my favorite authors of all time, so it was actually hard narrowing this down. But this is a male-male romance about a man who has a one-night stand with somebody, come to find out in the next day he's his new boss. That's awkward. And this also has pansexual representation, which is not something you see very much, especially in male representation. And then for Team Sci-Fi, we have The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Schreffer. This is about 2 boys who go up into space, and they don't remember the launch. They cannot remember anything about that. The AI is the voice of his mother, which is also real awkward. And they have to kind of work together to figure out what is going on. There are so many plot twists in this book. It is a hell of a ride, and I'm excited to have you along this journey with me. So with that said, let's get into the vlog portion of the video. Hi, hello, let's chat. I finished Work For It. I read this all in one day. This was such a great way to kick off this month with like a book that I knew that I love, the book with representation that I don't see enough. Pansexual representation is not something you see enough in books at all, but specifically in romance. You see a lot of bi characters, but not a lot of pan characters, and so seeing that was pretty fantastic. This book is so interesting in this like kind of like a grumpy dynamic. You have the grumpy sunshine dynamic, which is usual in romance, but when you have grumpy, especially with male romances, it's just kind of fun because at times they're just trying to like out grumpy each other, and like you're just like, guys, I think you might be hangry. I think you need a Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. I think Talia's books are all fantastic. I do love her indie stories because they're definitely steamier than the Brown Sisters. And the Brown Sisters are steamy, right? Like they are. But when you start reading her indie stuff, it's like, oh, you are slightly unhinged. And I'm here for it. I love it. This one is definitely one of her steamiest, up there with like I think her Christmas romance, Merry Inkmas. That one is very steamy as well. But this one kind of has that same dynamic. In what universe would you go and like just have sex with a man in an alley that you just met this guy at a bar? You have sex with him in an alley, and then the next day you're like, oh shit, you're my boss. And they have to have this like super professional relationship, and they have to like act like they don't know each other, but then like there's so much pining and so much angst in this story that it's I don't know, it's just great. I will forever recommend Talia and all of her books, but I think that it was something that like I really wanted a book that was different for my host recommendation for romance, because there are so many good romance books in the queer space with queer authors. And so I wanted to pick something A, that was indie or self-pub, and B, like something that maybe people haven't read, like, or not as many people have read, because I feel like, especially with last year with the Brown Sisters being a host favorite book, I feel like a lot of people read the Brown Sisters last year, and that one could have easily been a favorite for me. Obviously, Dani Brown is a book that will always resonate with me and will always be like an all-time favorite, but like I said, everyone's read that at that point, so I wanted to introduce people to a different side of Talia, and I think I'm going to be able to do that with Work For It. Can't recommend this enough, especially if you're on team romance, but either way, I mean, you know, in anyone, you could read this too. It's also a super quick read, and the audiobook is chef's kiss. Anyways, let's move on to our next book. I wanted to come and talk to you because I'm only 15% of the way into this book, but it's a short book and I'm working today, and so I thought I would like touch base with you so that it doesn't look like I just read the whole book in one sitting, because that's definitely what's going to happen today. Hopefully. I say that, but hopefully, because I do have a couple of meetings today that I don't know that I will be able to actually read all day, but it's fine. I'm reading The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Schrefer. This is actually the third time I'm reading this book, because I read it when it first came out. My buddy read it with Cal, and then we read it as the group book for the Avengers Initiative Reading Challenge a couple of years ago. Now we are reading it again. And every single time, like, I find new things about this book, and I just think it's such an interesting concept, and I think it's so smartly written. Like, I know going in that there's a really big plot twist at about like 30 or 35%. I can't remember. I think it's like 35%. That when I read it for the first time, I had to rewind and like read it again. It's about the 100-page mark if you're reading it physically. I remember like just being shell-shocked, and now like even knowing that it's coming, I am able to like pick out little pieces of like, oh, he did drop an Easter egg there. Oh, like this does make sense. But when you're reading it for the first time, and I'm not going to spoil it, it's going to be really hard not to talk about it because it's like literally the rest of the book after this point. So maybe it's a good thing I'm just like starting now and then I'll talk to you at the end because it changes the trajectory of the entire book. But let's talk about a couple of things like for my first 15% thought process. This book has an unreliable narrator, which is really fun because he wakes up from a coma and like cannot remember anything about the launch of this spaceship. He remembers up until the launch, and then he cannot remember the launch, and then he wakes up. The operating system, the AI, is his mother's voice, which is a little bit weird, like a little unsettling. So that's interesting. And then there's this other person that's on the other half of the ship, and the door between the two halves will only come down if they both agree to it. And so right now we're still very grumpy. Our other character is very grumpy, and it's a good time so far. This has a lot of elements of like different genres. Like it is 100% a science fiction book, and so it's my sci-fi pick for my host favorite. But there's elements of a thriller in here because there is that unreliable narrator, and so you have that writing style of almost a thriller. It has a romance in it for sure. So it's one of those things that like, even if you're not like into the super like high sci-fi, the sciencey type things, I think this book still works for so many people. Also, it's, you know, hella gay, which is a big win. I'm only 15% in. I don't have a ton to talk about, but I have been chatting for 3.5 minutes. So, love that. But I'm going to go to work. I'm going to try to read as much as I can today. Definitely will be trying to finish it on sprints tonight if I don't finish it today. So that being said, I'll talk to you later. Hello. I am sitting here doing some of the like Amazing Readathon videos, trying to prepare for June, and I thought I would also come and check with you guys because I finished The Darkness Outside Us yesterday, and listen, this is the third time I am reading this book, and I still love it so much. Ambrose and Kodiak, I think, will forever have my heart. They are two characters that are just like complete opposites, and it is the epitome of this grumpy sunshine relationship, but also facing like internal crisis, like an literal existential crisis about reality, and also the potential of the end of the world. This definitely has a romance at the heart of it, but I wouldn't necessarily classify this as a romance for the simple reason of like there's so many other things happening, and the romance wouldn't have happened without the sci-fi element to it. And I think that's probably like the best way to determine when you have a genre blend which genre it is, at least for the purpose of this readathon. This also has such an interesting conversation about like this queer norm society, because obviously like we are far enough into the future, and being queer and having a different identity or relationship than the traditional cis heteronormative looking relationship is just part of a normal life experience, and nobody questions it. With sci-fi specifically, and to an extent fantasy, but since we're talking about a sci-fi book right now, we're going to talk about sci-fi. You can have this queer norm society and make it a part of the story without like making it a big deal, and I kind of love those, because I feel like in contemporary stories, in contemporary romance, a lot of the relationships dynamic or the relationship struggles has to do with family not being okay with you being queer, or society not being okay that you're queer, or like your life looking different than what people think it should. And when you have a futuristic society, you get to have this extra layer of creative freedom, I guess, of like what we would like to be able to aspire to in terms of queer normativity. And so the idea of two boys being together is just like, yep, cool, that's what we're doing. And even to the extent of procreation is just completely normalized. And we don't have to have, you know, biological male and female to procreate, because we're in the future. We can do sciencey things. That's not a technical term, but you know what I mean. And anyways, I don't know what I'm trying to say at this point. But I just appreciate it. That's what I'm trying to say. I appreciate it. So anyways, I hope that convinced you to read Darkness Outside Us. Let's get on to the next book. Hello. Guess what? You have another car update. I did finish The Last Night at the Telegraph Club today, and I went back and looked at my Goodreads review, because a lot of these books, like, I have not read in years. I think this was 2021 when I read this the first time, if I remember correctly. I didn't look at the date when I looked at my review. I just wanted to see what I was thinking at the time. So for me, this is a 4-star read, but like I still chose it as a host favorite just because, like, A, I don't read a lot of historical fiction, and B, I wanted to make sure that I was picking from a queer author so that every single genre had you know, the genre bonus and the LGBTQ plus bonus if they chose to read my favorite books. So that was like my reasoning for that. This is still a very good book. Like, don't like think that like, oh, you only gave it 4 stars, how is it a favorite? Like, no, it's still a very good book. It's probably one of the best historical fiction books that I've read. This is a YA historical fiction, but it's such a good story of self-discovery, and like she's in this time period where being queer is just not acceptable. It's not something that's standard, and so she's trying to find a way to express herself and like the feelings that she's having. She's a normal teenager. Like, she is having big feelings like any other normal teenager is having, but she's having to suppress them. She's having to like figure out how to safely express herself so that her family does not completely disown her, or so that she doesn't like get killed, or her family doesn't get deported, whatever. Like, there's so many things that like are going through her head, and she's just like, but I just think girls are cute. I don't know, it's really sad, honestly, to know that this is accurate, and this is this happened in the United States. And that's just depressing, honestly. But I do think I'm like standing behind my review on this. I think that the ending was too fast. I think that like we rushed everything at the very end, and there was this subplot with her dad that like I wanted to see expressed a little bit more and like fleshed out a little bit more, but because that was such a subplot, we didn't really get an answer to it or like a reasoning behind the answer. 4 stars. Still loved it, and I probably will read A Scatter of Light when I am on Team Fiction if it fits a prompt / is a sightseeing prompt. So anyways, let's go on to our next book. Hi, hello. It has been like a week since I've talked to you last, so love that for me. It's been a week since I have finished a book. I am not in a reading slump, but I am very much in a life overwhelm right now. Of course, like PetSmart just decides to get stupid busy as I pull up and I'm trying to film this vlog clip. I'm in a life overwhelm. I'm not in a reading slump because I want to read. I just feel like there are so many other things that I need to be doing instead of reading to get ready for the Amazing Readathon. And then also like try to put out normal consistent content as well. Like, you know, I still have a channel I have to run during May while also trying to work on June. And I think for a long time I thought I was ahead on a lot of things, and then now I am realizing that I'm not, which is stressing me out. And that's fine. It'll all get worked out. I just need to find the hyper-focus. It's fine. So I am about 20% of the way through Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. And I think horror was an interesting choice for me for a favorite. Because I am really weird. I'm like really picky about my 5-star horrors. Not all of them have been by queer authors. Like most of my 5-star horrors have not been from queer authors. And so I was trying, because I wanted all 5 of them to be queer. And that way all the teams could have the most representation and the most like possible bonus points. That was very important to me. Shauna Maguire, or Mira Grant, I believe is pansexual. I know she's queer. So this one worked for that. And I think this is a book that like when I first read it, I want to say I gave it 4 or 4.5 stars. I read it during the very first Scatagorathon. So if you want to watch that vlog, I'll link it up above. I didn't necessarily rate it 5 stars at the very beginning, but the more I sat on that book, the more I kept thinking about it. And you know that when you keep thinking about a book, you know it's good. You know it's 5 stars. And so I want to say I bumped it up. It might still like technically be sitting at 4.5 stars, but it's a 5 star in my heart. It's a 5 star in my mind. It's fine. So that's why I'm calling it a favorite. Not all of these have, as you saw with last night at the Telegraph Club, like not all of these are necessarily 5-star reads, because they're not genres that I necessarily read a lot from. Or at least like recently. Anyways, long story short, I read Rolling the Deep during 30 and 30, which is the 3-hour or like 4-hour prequel novella to this book. And I loved that book so much. Like that book was everything that I wanted. I was so hooked. And so after that, that's when I picked Into the Drowning Deep as my favorite, because I was like, yep, I really want to reread this book now. You will see that like I was a little bit selfish in the books that I did pick because I wanted to reread some of them. And this made it easy for me to do that. 20% in. It has taken me a week to get to these 20%, but I don't think that that's the fault of the book. It's definitely my brain right now. So I'm not far enough into it to have any concrete opinion, other than I do feel like it throws you right into the story, into the action. You don't necessarily know who the characters are before you know what they are doing, which I'm fine with in this particular instance. Most of the time I want to get to know the characters first, and I want to know like their whys and their backstories and stuff like that. But I think in this instance it kind of works, because you're very unsettled from the very beginning, and I think that's kind of the point of this book. I am going to continue reading it. I'm going to listen to it tonight. I'm going to multitask, okay? Because I have to make a bunch of graphics tonight, and I can listen to an audiobook while I make graphics, and that will like help my brain like think that I'm being productive while also trying to read. because I have not been able to focus between like the Eras tour coming back last week, and those happen right in the middle of the day. I think it's like 12 o'clock that the tour starts. And so Thursday and Friday I was watching grainy live streams of it instead of reading a book, you know, for the second half of my workday. So, anyways, that is what I'm up to. I just wanted to check in because I haven't seen you in a while. I just, yeah, I am a little bit overwhelmed and stressed, and it's fine. Oh, also today, fun fact, we hit the number for last year's like total submissions, and we still have like 2.5 weeks left. So that's exciting. We only have 2.5 weeks left. Oh my God. It's okay. We can do it. It's okay. We can do it. Okay. I'll talk to you later. I need to go to get dog food. Hello, we're back in the car. I think this entire vlog is just going to be in the car, and that is okay because most of my reading has been taking place at work, which means that that's where I'm doing my clips, because my evenings have definitely been consumed with Amazing Readathon prep. This vlog is taking much longer than I expected it to, so love that for me. I'm about 60% of the way through Into the Drowning Deep. I am loving it more than I did the first time, which is great. I think last time I officially had it as a 4.5, but it's definitely going to be a 5. This book is so good. I think it definitely starts out more sci-fi. So like if you are a horror reader and you start reading it and you're like, what is she talking about? This is sci-fi. It definitely starts that way. It's very science heavy at the beginning, but then there's a really big flip once we find the mermaids and it becomes horrifying in a scientific way. This is definitely a genre blend in that like sci-fi horror. Honestly, I think either genre could claim this, but for the purpose of this video, it's the horror selection. This book is paced so well, and I think that the interesting thing about Seanan McGuire is that she can do so many different things. Like you have Wayward Children, which is very, obviously it's fantasy, portal fantasy, but they are 120 pages max. And yet those books feel paced well. Although to be honest, I usually read those in a binge, so it feels like 900 pages. But like those individual stories are paced really well. But then this, which is 450 plus pages, something like that, I don't know, honestly. Anyways, this also feels paced so well. We have these really tense moments, but then we have these softer character building moments, and it's just so done so well. And like Tori and Olivia, they're so cute, and they have like adult conversations, and it's really healthy in a very terrifying, tense way. And I like, even though I've read this book before, I don't necessarily remember everything that happens, and now I'm terrified for my babies, but it's fine. I don't know. I love this book so far. It's so good. It's so good. So even though I'm not reading a lot in this month, because I think this is like my 4th book that I've read, and it's the 15th, which is scary, I still, like, I'm having a good time reading. I'm reading a lot of, like, I'm reading good books. I'm not reading a lot of books, but I'm reading good books. So this was a good choice for me. But anyways, I need to get to work, but I wanted to touch base with you because I don't know, I just love this book. I want it to be a movie. I want this book to be a movie. Where are the film rights for this? Are there film rights for this? This feels like one of those like sci-fi horror movies that are like becoming really popular right now. So I don't know, this needs a movie. And I think, here's the thing, because like there is a prequel, and I'm wondering if I'm getting more out of this because I just recently read the prequel, and so I'm now remembering the original story that they are going back and finding. However, I don't think you should read the prequel first, because I think I got a lot more out of the prequel because I had already read Into the Drowning Deep, if that makes any sense. I think you could read them in either order. I got more out of the prequel because I had already read Into the Drowning Deep, but now I'm getting more out of Into the Drowning Deep because I read the prequel. Does that make any sense? Probably not. But anyways, I gotta go to work, but I'll see you later. Hello, I was filming, and so I thought I would touch base with you because I have finished Into the Drowning Deep, and I like this book so much better than I did the first time, which like I loved it the first time, but this is one of those ones that like kind of slowly grows on you. And I think I only gave it 4.5 stars upon like my initial read of it, because I was like, oh, the first 150 pages are slow. I went back and looked at my Goodreads review and I was like, what are you thinking? Okay, this book is phenomenal start to finish. It's like, okay, is there a lot of science in the first 150 pages? Yes. So if you're not a sci-fi lover, this may feel slow to you at the beginning. But let me tell you, when the mermaids get here, when like people start dying, it goes off the rails, and it goes off of them quickly. This is a book that I want to see adapted. This is a book that needs to be a movie. Like, I need to see this on screen. Big screen, straight to Netflix, whatever. It needs to be a movie. It feels like one of those sci-fi dystopian type stories. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. I don't have a ton more to say about this specifically than what I had at the, what was it, 65% mark, just because like anything after that point becomes really spoilery. However, I really love the characters in this book. I was scared for them the entire time. You know, she has a tendency to break my heart, and even though I had already read it before, I was still worried. In my journey of rereading these books, and some of them I haven't read for several years, this one was a little bit more recent, but the rest of them were like at least 2 or 3 years past from when I had read it originally. But this one I think is my favorite of the 4 that I have read so far, which is interesting because The Darkness Outside Us has always been a 5-star read for me. And that's actually the 3rd time I've read that book. Work for it. I love Talia. And this one originally was only a 4.5-star book. So for me to say like that this is my favorite book of the ones I have read so far is saying something. And I think that if you are a horror lover, you'll love this. I think if you're a sci-fi lover, you'll love this. I even think that if you are a fantasy lover, that you will still really enjoy this book. It has a lot of world building to it, and it has this like, not paranormal, but like otherworldly creature as part of it. And then also like there is a romance of sorts in here. Now, if you are normally the fluffy romance type of reader, killer mermaids decapitating people may not be your cup of tea, but there is a sapphic romance in here, and they have conversations and they communicate like adults, which is refreshing. But anyways, we are going to move on to the last book of this, and that is going to be The Library of the Unwritten. Now, I read this in 2020, back when my mental health was not great. I actually think this might have been the book that kind of got me out of a slump, and it took me a long time to read this book. So I'm hoping it doesn't this time, but also I'm not really in a slump right now. I'm in an overwhelm. We've talked about this, but not a reading slump, and I am really excited to get back to this book. Now, I had so many fantasy books that I could have put on this list. I wanted to make sure it was a queer author, but I have a lot of these options. And honestly, this one got swapped out at the last second. And the reason was entirely selfish. Like I said, I read this one in 2020, so it's coming up on 4 years. But I never finished the series, and I want to. But I knew that because it had been so long since I had read this book, I needed to reread this one before I moved on to books 2 and 3. So that's what I'm doing here. I very rarely reread books because it's really hard to make content for them unless I'm doing a vlog like this. So I'm making content while rereading a book that I've been meaning to get to for a very long time so that I can continue the series and hopefully potentially fit it into June. Here's the thing, I know it will work for a lot of prompts. I know it will work for city prompts, and I know it will work for a lot of sightseeing prompts. But the question is will I be on Team Fantasy when the prompt that works for the sequel? I don't know. The spinner wheel will decide that. So that being said, let's get started with this book. Hello, I'm here to wrap up this vlog and talk to you about The Library of the Unwritten because I did finish it, and I am even more excited to go into the next book. I don't know why I put this off for so long. I think because I read this before the second book had actually come out. I think I may have had an arc for the Archive of the Forgotten, but let's remember, it was 2020. My brain was not working properly, and I think I was doing everything on audio, which is not much different than today, but that's besides the point. I loved this book. I loved all of the POVs in it. There's so many different characters that all feel like they have a different voice to them, and you can really tell who is speaking in each chapter, which is really, really good and like hard to do as I think a debut. I want to say this is her first book. I love the concept of like, it almost starts out cozy with this idea of like the character got out of the library, and it like feels kind of like quirky, but it's so much more than that, and it quickly dives into this like battle of the souls kind of thing, and like Lucifer gets involved. It started out as this like simple little retrieval to go get a character, and then it ends up with this huge battle between like angels and demons, and there's this like devil's Bible in play, which is a weapon that is used and could destroy heaven and or hell. I do think that this book went so fast, like breakneck speed. And I'm kind of hoping that the second book kind of slows down a little bit, because at the end we ramped up so much that like I was getting whiplash at some points, but it kept you really, really engaged. So for that reason, despite me being in a slump is the wrong word, but like I'm not reading very quickly. Despite that, I read 50%-ish of this book in one day. So, that being said, this could be a really good option for you to pick up if, you know, you need a quick read. Okay, so those are my 5 host favorites. And if you want to read them, you will get some extra GRC. Obviously, you can read all of the host favorites. It doesn't just have to be your team's host. You'll still get the bonus GRC for that. But I kind of just wanted to sell you on these books and also give me a reason to reread some favorites that I haven't revisited in a long time. All right, that was a very long video. If you have no idea what the Amazing Readathon is, I'm gonna go ahead and leave the announcement video right here for ya, and you can check it all out. It's obviously not too late for you to join. You can join at any point during the month of June, and you'll still be able to participate. Let me know down in the comments below, do you reread books? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And if you're not feeling chatty, do a book stack emoji. That's all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!